Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not to Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett, and alongside me is Dr. Dave Peltz. So, how are you doing, Dr. Dave?
Most excellent, sir. Most excellent. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us today. So, if you've been tuned in to our podcast, thanks for coming back. And if this is your first time, welcome. Hopefully, you'll gain something from this. So, as you can probably see our screen, if you're watching, if you're listening, then you won't know this or see this. But we have a special guest today. We have Mr. Alex Shorter on the podcast with us today. So, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. And how are you guys doing today?
Really.
Great, great. Well, we want to go ahead and let Alex introduce herself before we jump into our topic. So, Alex, go ahead and tell people a little bit about you.
My name is Alex Shorter. I'm an entrepreneur and what they call a self-starter from Cleveland, Ohio. I am the U.S. lead for the Government Blockchain Association for the United Nations. I am a mentor in financial literacy, fintech technology, and life and everything.
Wow, wow, that's pretty cool. You touched on quite a few things there, so I'm sure we'll get into that during our podcast. And I'm sorry I failed to mention at the very beginning, our podcast is a personal, professional, and career development podcast. So we want to help you achieve your goals through assisting you with your journey. So I forgot to throw that plug out there. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, and jump into our topic today. And so our topic for Alex, we want him to get us started with urban literacy. So how does that resonate with you? What does that mean to you when you talk about urban literacy?
Urban literacy, I would say it's a play on words. I think literacy itself is important. Um, we would say urban literacy is to make it seem like that there's a reading problem with the kids and the adults in the urban community, when really it's a whole nationwide issue with literacy in America, where most adults read under a fifth grade level. So literacy to me means everything. Coming from the urban community where this is usually a problem, they say. Um, it was literacy that kept me out of trouble. It was reading books that helped me stay out of the streets. And it's important. I mean, even from comic books to Moby Dick, I collected a lot of books over my time, and I thank my mother for that because she wasn't able to give me the fancy things in life, but she gave me something more important than diamonds and gold, and that was the understanding and the love of literacy.
Wow. You touched on something at the very beginning, that we typically equate that to the urban community, that's where the problem is. But you're right, it is national, it is in all of our neighborhoods, but that's the label that we typically give it, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I'm glad you kind of pointed that out, that it's not just an issue in urban America, but
Yeah,
it's across the country.
54% of adults read below a sixth grade level in America.
Wow. And I didn't know that. So
And
so
that
yeah.
caught and I'm a money man as well. So when you look at that, we're looking at our workforce, we're looking at our scientists, our teachers, and it costs 2.2 trillion, I believe I read. That's how much it costs Americans that our literacy rate is so low annually.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
like the I like the fact that you touched on it's not just a youth issue, it's also an adult issue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of my background is human resource development, which is to oversimplify it, is adult learning. And it's important that we bring that up because that's part of our podcast, being personal, professional, career development. It's important to display that it's not just a youth problem, it's an adult problem,
Yeah.
but it really starts at the youth level. So we really need to focus on not only the older population, but the younger population that's coming in to help and also help the adults that are behind.
Right, because the adults, kids only spend so many hours at school. Then they spend a majority of those hours back at home.
Right.
So, whatever they're learning at home is going to always overcrowd what they're learning for those few hours in school or after school program. So a lot of the parents, it's not their fault. They can't read to their children or sit down and help their
Right.
children
Yeah.
read or understand those things. And that's a lot of the reason we started our programs so that we could assist the parents also. And that's where we found out that, when they say the root of a problem, you have to go to the root. And the root is usually, the where that child comes from.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my next question. So, since you have honed in on this particular area of concern, so that was going to be my question. What are you doing to maybe assist or to start to minimize that effect? What, and you just mentioned it. So you just touched on a program that
Mhm.
you offer. So what is
Yeah.
your program?
Yeah, we had a after school program. It was called Archangel. Archangel was a program that was designed to teach edutainment. Edutainment was created by KRS-One, the rapper, back
Hmm.
in the early 1990s to assist those kids who found rap or hip hop or music to be more easier to learn. Because even like myself,
Yeah.
before I could memorize things, I learned to memorize the rap songs that I used to listen to. And I used to have a stuttering and a slur problem.
Wow.
And I learned to overcome it by learning the rap songs. And my mother realized that when I was rapping the songs, I didn't stutter or slur my words, but it actually started teaching me to pronunciate better because I would
Okay.
learn to clear the words because in hip hop and real rap forms, not I won't say not this rap. A lot of people say, "Oh yeah, rap is bad now," but everybody has their opinions on different music and stuff. There's always still rappers who rap about education. There's rappers that rap about God. It's just the media doesn't portray those artists as much as they do the mainstream. But we learned that kids love to, rap. So, we taught them that rap was just poetry. And I want you to write a poem. And we started
Right.
teaching them to write poems and songs. Songs are poems. So we had the kids who worked on songs and rap, and a lot of the kids who didn't do music, they would be into acting and things like that. So we kind of tricked them into learning by
Right.
putting them in projects where they were doing their own music, they were doing their own plays, and it just helped them very much. And a lot of the kids in my program, if not all of them, I believe, all graduated high school, and they
Mm.
were they were excited about it, encouraged by it, and I started helping Tri C, Cuyahoga Community College, and a couple of other universities work on their retention rates and literacy rates after that.
Wow. I really like that approach combining basically the arts with
Mhm.
Mhm.
learning, like you say, with music or with acting, whatever they feel comfortable with or enjoy doing, and then tying that to learning. And
Yeah,
so
because how
that's
you going to read a line if you can't read your line? You got to read.
right, right. No, that's pretty good idea. I mean, we mostly we learn mainly most of us learn by doing, so to do something that you enjoy, almost like if you could have a job that you were doing what you love, that
Yeah.
it'd be more
It's
enjoyable,
a it's a
you'd have a
difference.
good
If you
time,
ever
absolutely.
had that, if you ever been, because I've had jobs just because I needed them, and I've had jobs because I wanted them,
Right,
and it is a very different. It's different than saying I got to go to work or I'm about to go do what I love to do. It's a
right,
big difference.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Alex, I'm gonna back up just a little bit. So what got you into urban literacy? What was the driving force behind your gaining interest into urban literacy? What was that drive?
When I was in school, I was just, sailing along. I just lost my brother of cancer. My baby brother passed of cancer, and I moved to Arizona for a few years. Then I came back to Cleveland. Um, I wanted to get a better job, and I had these felonies on my record, and I started going out of my own way to how do I get this stuff off my record, go to school, get an education. I knew I wanted to do better in the future, so I was thinking, what could I do now to get there later? So when I got back to school, it took a lot of paperwork to get me back in school because I didn't know that when you leave a place like that, you have to go through certain paperwork and stuff. So when they were helping me and I was going through my own appeal, I kept meeting other college students, younger, older, because community college is it's like a mixture of everyone. There's
Hmm.
everyone
Yep.
from different religious backgrounds, cultures, creeds, ages. And I would be there so much, I would meet new people, and a lot of them couldn't read and would need me to read their paperwork for them. And that's how I learned Chinese because one of them was an older Chinese gentleman, and I helped him one day. And when I start taking my international language classes. I took Chinese because he was in the class. So it was things like
Wow.
that. And there was a need for programming in Cleveland, Ohio. There are programs here that they help kids with literacy and all that stuff, but there were no one really there was no one really helping in like the I want to say the harder areas, the tougher areas. People was kind of, let's keep it honest, scared of some of these communities and neighborhoods. I had
Right.
lived in all of them. So Burt Bill and Carr is a big company here in Cleveland, Ohio, and the campus district community is a development group, and they started working on improving the community. They were missing a component. They wanted to do an after school program, and no matter how many people they talked to, I guess they couldn't come up with the program. And I was like, I'll do the program, and they were like, well, this guy Alex, he's not scared of the neighborhood, and the neighborhood knows him, and a lot of people questioned if I could do it because at the time I'm still kind of, I want to say street, and I'm stuck in my ways. I don't really, care about it. I was partying last night. I'm probably still partying right now, but I I remember when I was a kid. I remember, how important it was when we would win the little Pizza Hut certificates. I don't know if y'all remember that they used to do the read book. You used to do a little book report on the books you read, and then you get a little Pizza Hut certificate, and you get pizza.
Yep.
And I used to do it all the time. The other kids used to be like, can you do mine? I'm like, yeah, if you let me have your pizza. So I used to write everybody's books. And I was like, these kids need something like that. I was like, who's doing anything like that? And it was like, nobody. And I was like, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. We went up to all the schools. We did talent shows at all the schools to attract the kids to the program. Like I told you, we use edutainment. We
Hmm.
bring artists from local artists and artists the kids are familiar with, and I would talk either at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, and I would sneak in these little jokes, and I would go out there and be myself. I would have on a suit, but I have on Nikes. I have on my jewelry, but I would still speak to the kids like an adult. I wouldn't try to be too cool with them, and I wouldn't be cussing or anything because do my when I do my culture with adults, I cuss. I ask for permission to be adults. But with the kids, I learn to control my, speech. But before they know it, they'll be signing up for the program. We'll have a table when the event is over, sign up for this literacy program. We'll let them know, part of this, we'll be giving you free studio time because we know how hard that is to find because that was always a passion of mine as a kid. And there was never opportunities where someone was like, if y'all kids want to get off the streets, come to the studio and do music. Or
Right.
y'all kids want to get off the street, come to the library, we reading comic books. We're writing a comic book. I found a lot of kids with that one. When we started helping them make their own comic books, hundreds of kids showed up to the library for that one.
Wow.
And the music, you never lose with the music. Everyone loves music. Everyone has a little musician in their heart, whether they play
Right.
drums, guitar, or sing opera when nobody's around in the shower. Everyone has a musical talent, and we learn not to exploit it, but to utilize it.
Hmm.
Wow. Wow.
So how do you let's start kind of relating this to the personal, professional, and career development piece. So urban literacy, I think we're seeing the impact it has on the personal development because with the lack of literacy, obviously, it tends to lead to a decline. So with urban literacy or with literacy, I think it builds people's confidence and helps them see that there are other options in how and in their personal lives. They don't have to necessarily go with the flow. They can actually start making decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
So how does this urban literacy piece help them in their professional or their careers or their jobs?
So one of the things that I do a lot when we go into either the juvenile facilities or the prison, the men's prisons, is I make them read the book. I take out a book. I pick a book. I grab a book out of my library before I leave. It don't even matter the book. It could be Caesar, Civil Wars. It could be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It could be 48 Laws of Power. It could be um, Batman versus Superman. But I grab a book before I leave. And when I go to these places, I have everyone read the book together. So no one feels like, well, my book was harder than his book,
Mm,
or they had a different book and, feel intimidated by it. Because you ever want to see a grown man angry, ask him to read aloud in front of a crowd. You'll see,
mm,
I don't want
Mm.
to read this. Get this out of my face. They'll be mad. They'll say, "No, let him read. Let them read. I don't want to read. I didn't come here to read." When it's just as simple as reading a couple of paragraphs out
mhm,
loud.
Right.
So we let them know, a lot of people feel like they should have better jobs. A lot of people feel like minimum wage should be higher, things like this. I always had this conversation, especially with people who work automated jobs. The robots are going to have your jobs. That's just the fact of the matter. I know technology is cool, but sometimes, there's a bright and light side to the moon, a dark and bright side to the moon. So I try to push it where it's kind of detrimental. Not it kind of scare people. Scarcity gets people to move. That's how I
Mm.
ended up changing my life. I didn't want to die in the streets. I didn't want to die in prison. I don't want to leave this earth without doing God's purpose. It changed me, So
mm,
when you realize, when you tell people, especially guys in jail, I'd be like, how many kids you got? One of my favorite ones was, who has a girlfriend outside? And then they'll raise their hand. I'll be like, you better hurry up and get out. Girls don't like to be lonely long. And they'll start, in the room will laugh at each other and be like, you ain't lying. Better hurry up. Like, don't keep going to jail on that girl if you love her.
mhm.
That ain't her fault. Women get lonely, So scarcity has always been my learning tool for people. So when I speak to adults, I'm like, you want a better job, you got to learn. When I wanted a better job, I went back to school. When I got my GED, I wanted better jobs than GED jobs. I went to go get my associate's degree. When I got my associate's degree, I wanted better jobs than I could get my associate's degree. I went to get a bachelor's, so on and so on. And I'll be working on my executive MBA in January
Wow.
because I want to
Okay.
make more money and I want to take
Right.
care of my family more and help people. You can't help people till you can help yourself. So that's always really been, how I encourage them to, read. And a lot of people say, the phones distract you and everything, but I do a lot of my reading in the phones. I have CNBC apps on my phone where I read.
Mm.
It's just about the content that you allow your mind to take in. So,
Yeah.
I encourage people, and sometimes I don't feel like reading. I just want to skim through. But you know what? I've learned that when I skim through, I half it, I mess it up, and I have to go back again and retake an exam or something because, I didn't want to read. And, I don't like making those mistakes, and I teach other people to stop making them.
Right.
I really love your story, Alex, because this is what this podcast is about. It's the journeys of not so ordinary people. It doesn't mean our podcast is not, you know, designed for, you know, people that have come from ultra rich backgrounds. It was designed for normal people, regular people that have done something in their lives to make them above normal or to get out of that normal or that status quo and to do something better for themselves and their families and their careers. And I just absolutely love your story because you're the perfect example of why Joe and I have this podcast. You know, you came from very, very humble means, and that's and that doesn't even get close to where you began. And you were able to figure out your way through trial and error and pull yourself up and out of, I'm going to say, a broken system to get where you are today, where you're doing stuff that's very meaningful and impactful to the community and to other kids and to adults, and helping them to improve their lives. And I just want to say your story is just, it's fascinating. I could listen to you for hours and hours.
Thank you, thank you. Unfortunately, I could talk for hours and hours.
Well, I want to touch on something that you mentioned, and what you're just saying about helping adults figure out that they need to move on or move forward, and they need to learn. But that's kind of the approach I also use too. Is that scarcity? Let them know. And I always use this example. If you're working at an organization, and there's 500 people doing the exact same thing. You're in an industry where you're manufacturing or something like that, and then there's a change in your organization, and they lay all 500 people off. What are you going to do? If you're just like those 500 other people that are now out there looking for the same job. What's going to separate you? What's going to differentiate you from
Mhm.
them? And if you haven't developed yourself, if you haven't, you know, learned a new skill, learned something, or continue to add to, what you've been doing, then you're going to be in a lost sea of people trying to all get that same couple of jobs that are available out there. So I like that you use that approach. And my wife even told me just the other day, she said I'm kind of like Mr. Doomsday because I tell people the real. I mean, everything could be going perfect one day, but then the next day things change. Are you ready
Yeah,
for that change? And so
yeah,
that's what I'm not gonna give them this rainbows and unicorns.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you this is what could happen. And me and
yeah,
Dave have talked about this before on the podcast. We've been displaced. I've been laid off. The company has completely shut the doors and moved out of state. Just I've been in that environment where everything seemed like it's going great, and then they get all the employees together and say, "Hey, we're shutting the doors." So you have to be in a position to move forward. And if you haven't again developed yourself, if you haven't picked up a book or learned a new trade, a new skill or something to complement what you're doing, then you're definitely doing yourself a disservice. So I really
yeah,
like that approach again to give people the real that if you
Mm-hmm.
don't do anything, you're going to be in the same place. You
yeah.
can't move forward. So
Yeah,
And I
and
had a factory job before, and I think that was another reason that I went back to school. I was like,
yep.
can't do this my whole life. And then I was a nerd, so I'd be seeing all this
I
technology
think
and be
we're all
like, oh, they're
still
not
nerds,
gonna
Alex.
need
Let's be honest, we're all nerds here.
me. So yeah, they try to make you feel bad about it, but now nerds rule the world. So
Hmm.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and that's what's funny too. That my wife jokingly called me a nerd when I finished my doctorate degree. We were having a conversation, and had gone to school 9 years, and she was like, "So what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Well, why don't you try teaching?" I was like, "I don't know if I can teach." She's like, "Well, you." I said, "Why?" Because I just finished my degree, my doctorate degree. She said, "No, because you're a nerd." I was like, "What? I'm not a nerd. I'm cool. I mean, everybody wants to hang out with me because I'm cool. I'm cool." No, she said, "No, you're a nerd." I was like, "'Cause I went to school." She said, "No, you've always been a nerd." And at first, I was like, "What is she talking about?" And then I started thinking back. I started just really thinking about my life as a kid, that I
Yeah,
really was a nerd, but I was
yeah,
trying to be somebody else. I didn't want
yeah.
people. I wore glasses way back in the second, third. I actually threw them away because I but then I struggled because I couldn't see the board anymore in class. But she was right. I was a nerd, and
Yeah,
now I embrace that.
yeah,
And but for a long time I didn't want to be that nerd, but now I
yeah.
know I'm a nerd. Like
Yeah,
Dave
ain't
said,
nothing
we're
wrong with
nerds.
it.
Yeah, and I love that now. But it's just funny
I grew
how
up in a neighborhood where just having a book in your hand was enough to call you a nerd.
right, right.
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, I didn't think I was smart enough. The environment I lived in basically groomed me, or I was told and began to believe that I wasn't smart enough to go to school. And so I struggled through school. Through ninth grade, I struggled 10th grade. It wasn't until I've told Joe this a couple times, I found out my junior year I wasn't going to be able to graduate, or my senior year I wasn't going to be able to graduate because I didn't have enough credits. So I buckled down on an art class my second half of my junior year and all of my senior year, and I graduated with a 2.65 GPA. That's nothing to brag about.
Yeah,
So I didn't think I was smart enough to go to college.
yeah.
And I felt that way because I went in the military, and I just like, I'm not smart enough. And the real truth was I was smart enough. I didn't realize it till a decade later that, one of my peers in the military said, "You're smart enough, Dave." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Did you go through basic training? Did you go through your tech school?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Tech school is college level learning." I was
Mm.
like, "Oh." So I took two classes at the community college, and I did great. And I was like, "Huh, I can do this." And then I took a little bit of time off, and then I was like, "I want to try this again just to see if it wasn't a fluke." So I started going to college, and I fell in love with learning. And I think that's the big thing that I tell people, find what you're good at, what you really love, and do that. And it can be more than one thing, because I love what we do at the
Mhm.
podcast and many other, you know, facets of my career and personal life. But you got to learn this stuff. Fall in love with learning is what I try to tell people that are struggling, because um, I've told this story a couple of times. I was afraid of math. I was just, I'm not going to say
Mm.
terrified, but I was pretty scared of it, because I was like,
Mhm.
I'm still not smart enough to learn math, because I know
Mhm.
math meant algebra, which I failed out of. It meant trig, which I failed out of, and don't get me on started on pre-calculus and all that stuff. So, and statistics, and so those were the last classes I was taking in my college, in my bachelor's program, was statistics
The
and
math.
finance, and then I held up the last two classes I had to take were college math. Everything
Mhm.
else was done. Everything else was done. And I was so afraid to be in the classroom with other people that I bought the college textbook, and I went cover to cover on it, and I tried to test out of it because I didn't want to be embarrassed in the classroom by not doing well when I did so well with everything else.
Mhm.
And I tested, and I missed it by like 3 points. And I
Mm.
was so frustrated. And one of my coworkers was like, "What are you upset about?" And I was like, "Because I failed it. I failed the test." And they said, "But Dave, you failed it by 3 points. You just taught yourself college math." And I was
Mhm.
like, "Whoa." And then I took the classes and I did well. So that's the point of the story for me is, you know, do if you want to do it, because
Yeah.
it's a choice. It really is. It's a choice to do something. It's a choice to
Math was
learn.
my issue too in college.
Yeah. It's a choice to learn. It's a choice to get up every morning. It's a choice to go to work. It's
Mhm.
a choice to build family and relationships, it's a choice to develop yourself and to find new skills and to improve those skills. And I think that's a really, really great thing that you've shown us in this episode, is that you made choices to learn and improve, and then you made choices to take what you've learned, and instead of keeping it to yourself, you decided to share that with hundreds and thousands of people, and that is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome what you guys doing too, giving a platform so people can tell their story. So, like you
Absolutely.
said, we can share this information with each other because that's what makes knowledge power when you can share it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. And Dave said at the very beginning, that's why this podcast is Journeys of Not So Ordinary People, because we all have a journey. And typically we look at people and all we see is, you've seen those images of the success above the water, but you don't see all the work that it took to get there. Because,
Mhm.
before you told us your story, I was looking at all the stuff you doing on LinkedIn, and I was like, wow, he's doing a lot. But then until you start to fill in the blanks, I'm like, oh wow. So that's, and like Dave said, that's even more incredible and amazing that you know your beginnings into where you are today, and then now you talk about going on towards your, you know, an MBA. So yeah, it's just, but just seeing you on paper, I would have never put all these things together. It's not until we
Yeah,
heard your story, until you shared your story,
Mhm.
and again, and that's what this whole thing is about, is to help maybe impact other people that may have, you know, had trouble growing up, or you know, got in trouble, but
yeah,
hearing from other people that have overcome those things and now are on a successful path with family and taking care of family, friends, the community. That's what this is all about. And so yeah, we absolutely enjoy being having this platform to continue to
yeah.
hear those amazing stories from people that are getting it done and doing for others. So again, thanks for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you, because honestly, when it takes you to get older, and you become a little bit more open with your story.
Yeah,
Because when I was younger, having a 13-year-old mother wasn't something you wanted to talk about, and
right.
being poor wasn't something you wanted to talk about, and your lights being out and heat being out in the winter
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And then I don't know where, I guess somewhere down the line, people started to, embrace, the have-nots and the people who come from tough backgrounds. And even then, I was like, I looked at other people's stories like, wow, because to me, some people been through tougher things than me. I see things
Absolutely.
that
Yep.
I've never been through, and I love underdog stories, and I love to see people win, especially those who had it rough. So, when I look at my own story, I look back and I say, wow, whoa, looking from the outside looking in, it is a story that I have to share. It will encourage
Absolutely.
other people.
It's very
Yep.
impressive. So we've got
Yeah.
just a couple minutes left there, Joe. I mean, I think we got carried away with this one. This is so awesome, but yeah, we got like
Right.
2 minutes
Yeah.
left.
Well, again, thanks, Alex, for being on the podcast. So, do you have any parting words or anything that you'd like to leave with our audience out there as far as urban literacy or anything to help them, you know, progress in their personal, professional, or career development?
Oh,
Any
well,
final
I'll
thoughts?
say like Dr. Dave said, just persist, you know. And sometimes it can be tough, and sometimes, it can be hard, and your body can be hurt, and your mind can be tired. But just every little bit help, every little bit count, never give up. If you gotta add a drop of water to the bucket a day, just add a drop, and pour cups in when you can. But it's not a race, and it's not the end of the world. And share your story, talk to people. You never know what you'll learn about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that, and thanks for being on the podcast as well.
And the
So,
only thing
Dave,
I'd
do
like
you
to
have
add,
anything?
yeah, I was
Okay.
just gonna say, Alex, thanks for reaching out to us, man. This has been one of my favorite podcasts we've done so far. It really is,
I'm happy to
and
hear
I can't thank you
that.
enough for reaching out to us, because you have a wonderful story and it needs to be told.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Well, I'm happy you guys had me, very much.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. And hopefully I can come back again one day.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So again, I'm not gonna. I think you did a good job. You really summarized a lot of the things that we talk about on the podcast. So thanks for that. And again, we knew that this was in alignment with what we do here. So again, thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for being on the podcast. And again, if you want to connect with Alex, we'll have all his information in the description. But is there any particular site or anything that you know recommend people go to if they want to connect with you?
Okay,
But again,
everything's on my LinkedIn. You can
yep,
find my website on the LinkedIn, and
okay,
you can go to the GBA .org. You'll find me there with the members of the GBA and some of the work that I'm doing internationally for blockchain and all of technology, ed tech. So that's ed tech is education and technology. We're focusing on bringing literacy and technology together the same way we did edutainment.
okay. So again, all of our audience out there, if you want to connect with Alex, he's doing amazing work. And again, it's been a pleasure having him on the podcast. We really do appreciate it. And so again, this has been a joy for me, and Dave said it as well. So, with that, we just want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.
Thank you. All right, Doc. So have a blessed one.